right, so we open TouchDesigner. When you first open it, it will load this project, this default example project called new project.to. Yeah, so the .to file is the TouchDesigner file. There's also another TouchDesigner file called .tox, which is like a TouchDesigner exchange format. It's usually used for a component. Instead of an entire network, it's like a component or a piece of that network. Yeah, go ahead and the other, here, let me grab it. There's a specific way I put these. Sorry, TA, I'm still getting used to having you here.
It's all right. We'll find a balance.
There we go. There, that's pretty good. Okay. So yeah, it loads this jelly beans file. Oh, the first thing I'll say about TouchDesigner is it's best to have a mouse. You can get by without one, but it's best to have one. You'll get annoyed on certain things if you don't have a mouse, because your trackpad is not very good at differentiating between well, first of all, there's a lot of things that operate on a middle button click in Touch, and your trackpad, I don't even know if they can do a middle button. Maybe it's like a three finger click or some crap like that. Look into what the capabilities of your trackpad are in your settings, but it's best to have a 3-button mouse with a wheel. You can get a wireless one for like $8 on Amazon, I looked today. But yeah, having a mouse. So the scroll wheel is like how you would zoom in and out. You can also zoom in and out on your trackpad by swiping up or down. You can click and drag on the screen to move around and look at different things. You can also do that on your trackpad. You can zoom. Also, you can zoom by middle clicking and moving to the left or the right, or up and down. That'll zoom. If you accidentally zoom out and you have this view, you've zoomed out of your project into your root hierarchy. You can get back into it just by zooming into that component. You'll see that in TouchDesigner, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, that you can organize your networks inside of components, and you can go inside of those components by zooming into them, and you can go out of them. And also components can group a bunch of functions together, like particularly with 3D objects. You could put a bunch of them inside of their own geometry component and then spin the entire component, and all of those objects spin together. That kind of organization, right? So yeah, mouse, pan, zoom, center, home. We didn't talk about home. So if you're way over here and you can't find, you're like, where did my objects go? You can always hit the H key, which homes you. It centers the network viewer to the middle of its space, and that's usually where all of your objects will start. So yeah, H. You can also, if you have a particular object highlighted, excuse me, you have a particular object highlighted, like this out. If I do Shift H, then it will home on just that object and zoom into it. Okay, let's talk about the layout of the software. Any questions so far? Okay, go ahead and interrupt me anytime. I'm kind of a steamroller when I talk sometimes, so just as you need to, yell out. All right, so up at the top we have the menu bar, right? This first slice of the menu bar has various Well, the first three things will get you to the wiki, the forum, and the tutorials section of the derivative web page, and those are very helpful, especially when you're trying to figure out how things work. So you click on the wiki, and it brings up a website for this, and then I can say, oh, I need some information on operators, so I'll click over on operators, and then here's all the help file for operators. The next to that is the forum. So if you have a specific problem, like I tried this thing, I've tried it 100 times and it doesn't work, you can post a post about it in the forum, especially if you think it's a bug or something like that.
There's also a really good Facebook group that Cammie and I are members of. It's TouchDesigner help group, and they're super responsive and super fast.
Cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, with forums, usually if you're gonna create it has two different functions. You can search the forum for other people who have had the same problem as you, which happens all the time. You can also post your own problem and hope that people get back to you in the time frame that you want. What will help them getting back to you in the time frame you want is that you post a file along with it so that they can see it. If you just describe a general problem and like it doesn't work, they don't have any frame. The people looking at, they don't have any frame of reference as to what you did wrong. So a good description of what you're doing, of what you're trying to do, a file included with that description, and a concise post where you don't just say, this doesn't work, help me. No one's going to help you, right? If you say, I've done this, but it's offsetting the image to the right by 30 pixels and nothing I can do seems to send it back over to the left. That's a specific problem that somebody who knows how to solve that can say, oh yeah, I know how to do that. Let me just respond in 10 seconds, right? No one wants to just respond to a general help call and analyze your patch one little piece at a time. No one's going to do that, right? But if you keep it concise to a specific problem, you include your file, then an army of nerds can come to your defense and help you out. Yeah, so that's what's great about the forum page. Tutorials. This is also great. So first things to know, these first two videos here, a lot of what we're going to be doing today will be very similar to what's in this videos. I actually cribbed a lot of it. And the other thing to know about this videos is this guy has the most boring voice I've heard in a long time.
Hello everyone. Here's the fast track to learning the TouchDesigner user interface and its main concepts.
He's just very monotonous and drones on and on and on. So if you're an insomniac, you could do a TouchDesigner tutorial late at night and learn something and then fall asleep. So great. Yeah. What else? Okay, so next to the tutorials, we have this IOI thing. That is actually a cook indicator. You can toggle that on and off, and that changes whether the patch is cooking. You can see these jelly beans stopped animating when I turned that off because everything stopped cooking. Cooking means if the object is going to do something, it does it when it cooks. Okay? We'll talk more about cooking in a minute. Next to that is your FPS meter. This is the global cook rate. It's trying to get 60 frames every second. This is its actual frame rate. So did it get in the 1 second? Did it draw 60 frames? If not, it would print out what it is here. Next to that is a real-time flag. Basically, there's two modes you can use TouchDesigner in, real-time and non-real-time. Most of the time, if you're going to be using it for live graphics, live overlays, using it for interactive stuff, you're going to want it in real time. What that means is that if you're playing a 30-second video and you're doing a bunch of filtering to that video, like messing with the colors and warping it and displacing it and all that stuff. And all of those different operations that you're doing make the cook time too long for it to play in 30 seconds. It'll drop frames as it needs to play that in 30 seconds so that when that movie is done, 30 seconds has elapsed, right? And you'll usually want that if you're trying to do things in real time. Then what happens is it keeps things in time, but the frame rate suffers. The other way, if you take it out of real time, then the priority is on each frame priority rather than real-time priority. So in that case, it will render every single frame of that video, all of them, even if it's at 100 frames per second, and there was no way it was going to be able to do that in 30 seconds with all of the stuff you're doing. It'll render every frame, even if that takes 15 minutes. At one frame every 5 seconds, it'll do it. You probably wouldn't want that scenario in a real-time interactive use because it takes too long. But if you're outputting to a video file, you don't care how long it takes, other than whether that's enough time, whether you have that amount of time in your schedule. But like, it may take 5 minutes to build this 30-second clip, but you're outputting it to a video file that then you play at real time. And it looks great, right? So if you're using TouchDesigner to do offline effects chains that creates a video file at the end, then maybe you want to turn off the real-time flag so that you get every single frame of that video instead of it dropping frames to try to keep up. Okay? And then next to that we have a, what is this? A status menu, a status window. So it gives you information about the operations that have been happening, and it has a timestamp. All right. All right. Below that, we have the palette window. Oh, no, sorry. We have this. We have perform mode. Go ahead and you can click that. It'll open up perform mode, and everything else disappears. What happens here is it stops rendering all of your edit stuff, and it just renders the final result. This will make your frame rate go way up. So it's a good thing when you're done to put it into perform mode, and you can even change your file so that it opens in perform mode. To get back, hit escape. Don't hit the red button because it'll just close your patch. Hit escape. All right. Did anybody accidentally close their patch? You can open it again. Just open new project 1.to. Yes, question.
So the real-time thing,
yeah.
If it's the red box, it's off. And
no, yeah, exactly. If it's a red box, then it's in frame priority, and not real time. And then if it's checked, then it's in real time priority.
And what was the thing next to that? Sorry.
That's just a status window of things that it's been of operations that have taken place in the last cook.
Okay.
Right. Okay. All right, so then we have performance mode. Next to that is the open palette icon. You can click this to get rid of you can click it to open your palette or to close your palette. You can also click this X on the palette browser here. I'll talk more about palette here in about 30 seconds, but I still don't know what this icon is supposed to be. Can someone please tell me? I think it's a hand with an arrow coming out of it. Or maybe it's like an empty box with like the front cut out. I just don't know what that's supposed to be. An anchor? Someone tell me. All right. So yeah, if you need your palette browser, whoa. What do? I hit home. There we go. Okay, if you need your palette browser, you can hit that button to open it. You can also just close it with this. What your palette browser does is it gives you access to like code snippets, various types of code snippets. So like you could go down to tools, for example, and I need, maybe I want to have a multi-mix tool. and I can drag that from the palette browser into my network, and now I have this container comp that has inside of it a whole bunch of stuff for doing mixing. And it's an example of this code is already done for me. I just need to figure out how to hook it up to my patch now. Right? So it's like common code snippets are there. You can also add your own code snippets. If you start doing the same thing over and over again and you hate having to keep patching the same 5 things, you can put them in your palette browser and get them out under my components. I don't remember what the specific method of getting yours in there. We'll talk about that next week. But yeah, you can save your own code snippets there. So, but for now, let's go ahead and close that palette browser because we're not going to use it for the time being, and we want more space on our network editor. Go ahead and delete anything that you pulled out of the palette browser. All right, so we talked about the palette browser. Then the next thing here is these pane layouts. So by default, we're in the single pane layout. But the cool thing about TouchDesigner is you can be in more than one place at the same time. So like this is a component called a geometry component. If I needed to be inside this geometry component and change things, but at the same time I want to be looking at and changing parameters outside of that component, I could go to a split view like this, either left and right or top and bottom. And in one of these views, I could go inside of this component. And I could change things. Like I can hit, all right, so I don't have a parameter window. If you don't have a parameter window and you need one, the shortcut is P. So I could click on this and I could change the parameters of this, like the diffuse color. And now I can see what this looks like on the cube outside of this geometry component, right? If you change the color, go ahead and set it back to white. It doesn't really matter though. All right, so now we have these 2 windows. We probably want to have just the one. To go back to the one, all you have to do is click up here on the single pane layout button. All right, questions?
How did you get inside of the component?
Zoom into it.
Zoom in.
So highlight, yeah, you can home on that object or just position it in the middle of your network editor and zoom in until the camera runs into it and busts through the wall to the other side. Yeah, there's a keyboard shortcut. If you have it, if you have the component highlighted, you can hit I to go inside. I for inside. You can also hit Enter. Enter will go inside of it. I think O will go outside. Nope, I'm wrong. How do you go out? I don't know the shortcut for out. You zoom out until it pops out of that component. And you can see that even your main network here, project 1, is the location of where we currently are. That's inside of a component that's even further removed from the root. And this is the root, and like the performance mode is here in the root, and project 1 is where we're doing all of our editing. What? U? Oh, so I'm lost. So what do I hit to get back to my view? H. Great.
U for up.
U for up. Nice. But not D for down. In and up. In and up. Okay. So we're still at the top of this thing. We're still at the top here. All right. So we talked about the pane layout. You can create your own layout here. I'm not exactly sure how that works. Let's see. Test. Create. Oh, I get it. So I could, like, if I had a layout that I liked, and this was like zoomed to a particular place, I could create I could name that layout something. Like, okay, so let's do a quad layout, and I'm going to name this Can I overwrite test? Let's see if it'll let me. Yeah. Oh no, it just gave me 2 different tests. So I can click on test and it will go to that layout that I had the way I wanted it. I'm not exactly sure why that's that useful right now, but we'll. I'm sure it has uses. Okay, cool. Go back to your single pane layout. Don't worry about your tests up here. Just don't use them for the time being. I'm not sure if you can how you remove them. Maybe you like drag them off. No, it doesn't let me. I'll figure out how to remove those later. Okay. All right. So we're on the next bar now. So below that we have pane type, where you can change the type of pane that you're looking at. You have the open viewer, which this is actually very helpful. So we looked at the split pane, which is one way of looking at 2 things at the same time. Another way of looking at 2 things at the same time is to open a viewer for one of them, which opens a separate window. So I can say open viewer on this out, and it creates a little window, floating window for that ops output. And now I can still go inside this geometry and change things around and see the final output. So like, I don't know, I could insert an operator here that's a something like what? Blur. A blur. And I could see P for parameter. I could see, so this is what, filter size, I guess. Yeah, and I can see that output in real time in that window that I've created, right? If you couldn't keep up with me on adding this blur, don't worry about it. It was just to show you. I'll show you how to insert operators in a minute. For now, you can actually go ahead and delete that. If you did add one, go ahead and delete it. And you can see that it maintains your connect. If you add an operator between 2 operators and you delete that operator, it maintains the connection like you never put that there, which is nice. Max never did that. You had to go back and connect it again. Okay, so yeah, you can create your own windows called viewers to see the output of an operator while you're in a different location, because it's a floating window. All right, next to that we have back and forward. What does that do? I'm not sure. Back. So that's back and forward in your navigation. So that's another way to get in and out of things, is to just go back. Next to that, we have, what do we have? Oh, add operator. That's one way of adding an operator, is by clicking this. The other way is by hitting the tab key. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's see. After that is bookmarks. I'm not even going to do that right now because I don't know what that is. And go to root, which actually goes to the root of the project. So if it zooms in and centers in on that root, which is this project window, but if I zoom out, you can see the other stuff that's in this project window. If you're in this project window, you can get back into, if you're in this root window, you can get back into your project network editor by zooming into project 1. Can you also, no, you can't click that button, but you can just zoom into project 1. Okay. The next thing they'll notice is this. This is our current location. We are in /project1/. Slash is the first slash is the root. If I go back to the root, I zoom out, you can see that I'm just in slash. So slash is the root. Inside the root is a container called a component called project1. Inside that component is all of this stuff. I could probably make another component here called project2. A container And this is a container too, right? Yeah. So this is called container 1. This is called project 1. If I zoomed into container 1, you can see that the address now is /container1. So you will sometimes have to use this directory, especially when you're doing like Python code or other text-based references where you're trying to get data from an operator that's in a different directory. Then you may have to specify that this is not in /project1, this is in /container1. Because otherwise it won't know where to look for that, that operator. Okay, so if you created a container 1, go ahead and delete it. Go back into your project 1. Question. A container is a kind of component. I'll talk more about those families in just a minute. Don't worry if you're completely stumped right now. Just try to follow along with me best as possible. Nothing we've done so far, everything we've done so far is just to look at stuff. So if you missed it, this is still the same file that we started with. So you're fine. You can just keep going from here, right? All of this stuff we'll be talking about multiple times. So this is just the introduction today. Cool, and it's already 2 o'clock, so we're doing all right. Never get as much as I hope. So yeah, what we're going to do is I'm going to continue talking about the basics of this. At some point, probably in the next half hour, I'm going to stop talking about the basics and leave the rest of that for next week, and I'll show you something cool, and you can just follow along as best as possible. You should be able to do this something cool that we'll be doing. It's not that hard. And your homework is going to be based on that something cool. All right, so for the next half hour, let's continue on looking at the basic functions of touch. Let's see, where were we? Okay, we talked about panning, zooming, and editing the network. You can move objects around by left-clicking on them. You can select more than one object by either clicking on an object and then command-clicking other objects, and you can move them together as a unit. You can also box-click on things by right-clicking and holding on some empty part of the network editor and dragging a box. And then it will select whatever you put your box around. You'll notice that one of these objects is ringed in green and the others are ringed in yellow. The one that is ringed in green is your active object. It's going to be the object that has the parameters shown in the parameter window. And any change you make in this parameter window is only going to be applied to that active object, not to all the others. Questions so far? Okay, continuing on. Let's see. We talked about zooming. We talked about the middle mouse button. We talked about the H key. All right, so it says in an empty area of the network, right-click and release the mouse button. You will see the network menu. So that pops. You can pop up this menu called the network menu by right-clicking on an empty area. From here, you can add operators, which is the same thing as hitting the tab key. It even tells you that in the menu. See, all the shortcuts are listed on the right-hand side. You can open viewers, you can home. So go ahead now, just go ahead and say home all. And that should move the camera so that all of your objects are in the same view. It also will zoom it out if necessary to put all of your objects in the same view. Again, you can always just hit the H key for that. So shortcuts are great. Let's see. Right-click on one of the nodes, and you'll see the node menu. So this is the network menu, and this is the node menu. So these are menu options based on this particular component or operator. So I could Here I could cut, I could copy, I could delete. You can also just do that with Command X and Command or Control X if you're on Windows, or the backspace key, right? But you can also do it from this menu if you're so inclined to choose things from menus. Yeah, we'll talk more about that later when it becomes more important. Choose view. That would be the only thing. We did this already. So from this menu, you could open up view, right? You can also, I believe, just hit, no, not the V key. What is view? Oh, it doesn't have a shortcut. Yeah, so you can open up view. You can also open up a borderless view. Oh gosh, how do you get rid of a borderless view? Oh, you hit escape. Okay. All right, so let's look at how you can add operators. So you can add operators in a couple different ways. We can hit the plus key up here to add an operator, and that brings up the op create dialog. We can also hit the tab key, does the same thing. We can also right click on this to bring up the network menu and select add operator. All of those will get you to the same place. That's one of the cool things about TouchDesigner. Well, sometimes it's cool and sometimes it's confusing, is that there's many ways to do everything. And it really, you'll develop your own programming style as you go on. So this is the op create dialog. Op means operator or node, right? This is a node-based visual programming language where each one of these nodes either processes data or creates data, and then you connect different nodes together to get a series of operations and and have something that's different on the other end of the network chain. Okay, so for now, let's see, we are going to, on the right side of the first node, do we want to delete things yet? Is that where we're at? No. It says on the right side of the first node, right click it and create click level. Okay. All right. Oh, we do. All right. So go ahead. We're going to delete this and we're going to start some stuff, make some stuff from scratch. So go ahead and you can do a Command A to select everything. You could also right click and box drag over everything and hit the delete key. And it's gone. We deleted it. That's fine. It was just a demo file. And now we're going to go ahead and create a, you can get to the op create by tabbing, like I said. You can also double click on an empty section of network editor to bring this up. We're going to go to tops. So up here you can see there are there are 6 families. There are 6 families of operators: comps, tops, chops, sops, mats, and dats. They love their 3-letter words, or 3 to 4 letter words in this program. Comps are components. Tops are texture operators. Chops are channel operators. Sops are surface operators. Mats are materials, and dats are data operators. So comps, components, these are all also subdivided into 3 categories. You have 3D objects, panels, and other. 3D objects are basically for creating things that have vertex data. So like 3D models, 3D primitives like spheres and cubes and toruses. Also for rendering that stuff. So renderers, lights, and cameras, right? So to render a 3D scene, you have to have a couple things. You have to have something that you're rendering, some geometry. You need to have a light to illuminate that geometry. Otherwise, it's in the blackness and you don't see it. And you have to have a camera to actually look at that geometry. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But So those are comps. You can also have under comps, you have various types of interfaces like buttons, sliders, and containers that you can use to organize your code. And then there's also other category, which is like base animation. Animation is for creating keyframes so your values slide in particular ways over keyframes. If you're like making somebody walk, and then at some point as he's walking across the screen he has to jump, then you'd have a keyframe that at that jump point, and then all of a sudden the translation goes up instead of just to the right. Time and window. I'm not exactly sure what some of these do, so we'll talk more about those later. All right, texture operators. This is one of the more common. I'd say tops, chops, and sops are the most common things you're going to be using. Tops, texture operators. This is basically all 2D graphics. So video is two-dimensional, of course, until you can apply it to a three-dimensional object as its texture. But the video data itself is two-dimensional. You also have, so in this, you see that some of these are darker than others. The darker ones are called generators. So they actually create data either by generating it from scratch or loading it from a file or loading it from some other piece of data. But they're creating data. They have data that comes out of them. The other ones here are generators and filters. The other kinds are filters. So they are, instead of creating data, they take data in and change it somehow. So like if you're talking about a level, then it's gonna get mad at me because I don't have any data coming into it yet. But I could take the data from a movie file in. Let me zoom out, sorry. Movie file in, which you can shorten this list by being up in the search field up at the top, which is usually automatically highlighted for you. I don't know what it was in that time, but you can start to type in movie file in, and now anything that has MOV in its title will be highlighted for you. So if I have a movie file in, go ahead and create one, and go ahead and create a level, and go ahead and now draw a connection between this and this. You can do this in two different ways. You can do it in Max style or Isadora style. Max style is you grab and click and hold and drag it to the other object and then release. Isadora style is click once, release, it pins to your mouse, click another time and release, right? So if you've ever done either of those programs, you'll notice, you'll recognize that. Yes?
How do you have the transparent checkerboard?
How do I have the transparent checkerboard?
I don't have a transparent checkerboard.
I don't know.
Am I the only one?
Do you guys all have transparent or a black black behind your banana?
Oh man.
You got black behind your banana? What is it? It's got to be in the. Okay, it's probably in the parameters of something. There's bottom half is alpha. That's not going to be it. Multiply RGB by alpha automatic.
I mean, it's probably transparent. It's just not displaying as such.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's a. It must be something in your preferences. Where is that? Preferences under tops. Ah, viewer background, checkerboard or black. That's where it came from. Apply. Oh yeah, there we go. I like checkerboard. I'm going back to checkerboard. So there you go. Cool. Great. So now we have our movie file in, and we have our level 1. And over in your parameters for level 1, I can grab, make sure you have your level 1 highlighted in green by clicking on it. Now over here in your parameters, make sure that's full screen. There we go. In your parameters, I can change, like for the black level, for example, and you can see that changes changes the image, filters the image. I can also change the brightness and the gamma. These are common parameters that you'll be using in TouchDesigner for various things. Let's see. Oh, what else was I going to say? I had something I wanted to say, but I forgot what it was. So there. Okay, let me talk about viewer active. So you can, down in the bottom corner of this, you can click on this viewer active, which gives you a view inside of it and kind of turns off. The main difference between it is if it's not in viewer active mode, when you click on it, you can move the node to a different place on the screen. When the viewer is active, clicking on it actually interfaces with what's inside of it. So especially if it's like a slider or some other, if you make a new object and go to comps and choose a slider, if I wanted to move this slider, I can't do it because it's not active. As soon as I make it active, then I can move the slider. Right? So if you're trying to get to something, you're trying to get to this level 1 and I can't get my parameters to come up in the parameter window, it's probably because you had it on active. You can still get your parameters to pop up in the window when it's on active, but you have to click down here by the name. Right? If you had it off of active, you could click anywhere on it. Questions so far? Okay. How are we doing on time? Now I can't go out of full screen. There we go. All right, 2:09. We're doing all right. Okay, so we have a filter. We have a level filter. Click level. We got that. We got that. We got the generator. Okay. In the network editor, add a pattern chop. Go ahead and click on this. You can go to chops either by clicking on the tab. You can also hit the tab key to go to a different tab until you get to the one you want. And I want a pattern chop. So I could start typing in pattern, and you can see that it highlights it. If there's only one highlighted, you don't even have to click on it. You can just hit enter, and it will. Normally, it will automatically select it for you, especially because I have a real problem where I know what I want to click, but for some reason I don't click that thing. See, that time it worked. I just hit enter, and it worked fine. Okay. So this is a generator. As you can see, we can change what kind of signal it's creating. Sines, cosines, triangle waves, ramps, square waves, pulses, so forth. Random, noise. Go back and put it back on sine for now. Okay, we click on the chop pattern and place it on the network. We did that. Bring up op create again, and we're going to bring up one called noise. So we can start typing noise, N-O-I. Nope, it didn't work that time. N-O-I, there it is, noise. And we get some noise. There's different kinds of noise. For now, let's just leave it on sparse. Let's see. Noise. So click to create a noise chop. We talked about the 6 families of operators. Let's look at this. We did that. Okay, let's look at surface operators. So far we've looked at texture operators and data operators. right? So texture deals with two-dimensional data like this banana. Surface operators deal with three-dimensional data. So go ahead and create a surface operator, SOP, and choose one. Let's see. Choose a, oh, do I have to do that first? Let's see. Hold on. Oh, yeah. No, go ahead. Sphere. Find one that says sphere. You can start typing it in the search button. So this is a primitive. And that's a sphere. Whoops. Get back in there. There we go. Okay. If we want to render this sphere, we're going to need some other stuff. But you can look at it and you can change things about it here. Like change it from a mesh to a NURBS and change the type of things. You can, I think there's a way to render it as a wireframe. I think you highlight it and you hit, no, darn it. There, yeah. Make it active and hit W. And that turns it into a wire, that renders it as a wireframe. And now if I were to change this, well, that didn't do anything. But if I change the connectivity under this from quadrilaterals to alternating triangles, I thought that would do something. Rows, columns. I guess I'm doing the wrong thing. Hold on. Ah, that's it. Okay. So change it. Sorry, I just forgot what it was. So change it from mesh to polygon. And you can see it changes the kind of sphere from a kind of latitude and longitude to more of a like fullerene, a geodesic, right? So there are some instances where this kind of geometry is going to work better for you than this kind of geometry. So you can change the type of geometry and how it's rendering these objects. That's something that Max really doesn't do, that I know of anyway. There's some other really interesting differences between Max and Touch about the way it deals with 3D objects. I'd say that Touch has way more functionality in manipulating 3D objects, and it does it better as far as like frame rate goes, and also if you're warping and deforming 3D objects, doing that in Max can be a real pain because everything gets torn apart, whereas things that are supposed to be a solid sheet, if you start adding noise to them in TouchDesigner, they generally will stay a solid sheet, whereas in Max, those triangles that will get separated and just torn apart into a bunch of triangles all over the place. So the warping in this looks a lot better. So let's see. Okay. To press the tab key and select comp, there are 3 types of components: geometry, comp, SOPs, and materials. Right, press tab and panels list. So we already talked about that. Oh, we haven't talked about. So did we talk about comps? I think we talked about comps. So I'm still just talking about the different classes right now. So we've looked at a couple. We've looked at some surface operators. We've looked at chops and tops. We've looked at comps, and I did talk about this, that they're broken up into 3D objects, panels, and other, right? And we looked at a slider already, so I don't need to do that. All right, so let's move on to DATs. So DATs are like data tables. And again, you have generators. Here are the darker ones, which are either you create data in them by editing and putting data in them, or sending data to them from another object via references. And then you have filters that take that data and change it somehow, right? So for now, let's just choose something that just does something without us doing something to it. The monitors DAT. Go ahead and select the monitors DAT. And this will automatically show me what I'm using as my monitor. Right now I'm using a monitor called Optoma 1080p. That's the projector, and my resolution is 1920 by 1080, with the top pixel being 1079 and the right pixel being 1919. Right. So if I needed this information, like I was changing how my objects were rendering based on the size of the display that was rendering them, I could pull this information out of this DAT and send it to someplace else. We talked about connecting nodes with wires. Already did that. Let's see. Insert operators. Okay. Let's go ahead. We did the. Yes, question.
I'm just curious about the difference between comp and SOP, because it seems like SOP could create new objects, or?
So yes, surface operators, SOPs, are required to create 3D objects because they are the 3D objects.
Okay, so
But comps are required for rendering 3D objects.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and skip forward a little bit and look at that because we're starting to run out of time. So we have this sphere. If yours is still in wireframe, you can pull it out of wireframe by hitting the W key, although mine now went away. You know what? I'm just going to delete it and make another one. Delete. Why aren't you deleting? Delete. Oh, because I'm in active mode. Delete. There we go. And let's make another one. Sphere. Hey, there it is. That's the way I want it to look. All right. So if we wanted to render this thing to a window, we would want a few things. We would want go into component. We would want a geometry component to put that sphere inside. We would want a light to be able to light it, otherwise it'll be black. And we would want a camera to look at it, otherwise we won't see anything. And then we need one more thing to tie these three things together, and that is under tops, a render. And when you click that, you can see it automatically connected all three of those to my render. So if I wanted to render this, I would probably also, and you'll do this and it won't make really sense at first, but once you start building things yourself, it will make sense. Every operator family, I think, maybe not, no, yeah, I think every operator family has a operator called null. Null. You're going to want to attach a null to the render. Okay? And you're going to want to then display that null or render it. Okay? So now we have this torus in here, but we want our sphere to be in there instead. So let's go ahead and, so what did I do to get that to come up on the screen? There's this little thing down here, this little next to the active viewer called display. And all that does is it displays in the background of your editor what you're currently, whatever you have clicked on that. And if I have two things clicked on that, it'll give me two different windows side by side with the two different things that I have toggled on to display. And this is kind of a quick way without going into your final render window while you're editing to see what's going on, or to see what will be going on when you go into performance mode. Questions? What? And there is no difference right now. The signal from render is being passed to the null object. The null object doesn't do anything by itself. It just can contain what's passed to it. So in this case, the reason why, and like I said, it won't make a lot of sense to you at first, but when you start doing it more and more, you'll see why putting a null at the end of your chain is important. One easy reason, quick reason why, is if after rendering I want to process this image more, I can, now that I have it with a null at the end, all I have to do is move this null over and insert an operator in the middle, which you can do in a couple different ways. You can right-click on this inlet and put something else, like a, well, let's just put a blur. And that will automatically insert that operator in the middle. And now I can go ahead and blur this out. And now you can see it's blurred, right? And I haven't changed this one. This null is always at my end, and I can add as many operators in between as I want and not have to go back and change flags and stuff, right? That's one of the main reasons why you use a null. There are other reasons that we'll get into later as well. For now, let's get rid of that blur. So if you created the blur, just go ahead and delete it. All you have to do is highlight it and delete it, and that connection is restored between those two objects. You don't have to redraw it. Okay, so right, we wanted this to be a sphere instead of the torus. How do we change that? Well, we are rendering what's inside of this geometry container, or component. So what we really want to do is put the sphere inside of the geometry component. Go ahead and Control or Command X to cut that sphere and zoom into the geometry component. And you can see inside the geometry component so far is just this torus. Whoops, there we go. So I can paste the sphere there instead, and I could just delete yeah, but it doesn't do anything because I believe I have to change on the outside of this. Why? Oh, I know why. Because it'll only render things inside the geometry component that have their render flag turned on. So down here, these are your different flags. There's a compare flag. There's a template flag. I'm not sure what either of those do yet. I'll get back to you on that. There is the render flag and the display flag. We need to make sure that the render flag is turned on, and now it renders that sphere. Right? What happens if I have a torus and a sphere in here with both of the render flags turned on? I think it'll just render them both. So I have the render flag on this turned on as well. And yeah, it renders them both. They're both in the same position right now. So it's kind of creating this like fat Saturn thing, like a sphere with a donut, a sphere pressed into the middle of a donut. But the cool thing is everything in this geometry is hierarchically linked together. Like I can now rotate both of these at the same time by changing the rotation parameters on this geometry component. And I don't have to go in on every single object inside there and change its rotational parameters, which would be a big pain in the butt, right? So now I can just, here on the geometry, I can say, okay, I want this to rotate 45 degrees on the x-axis. And now I can see the top of the Saturn carrot thing. Does that make sense? So far, so good? All right, how much more do we want to do before I break into the cool thing? We talked about that. We talked about that. Oh, I do want to show you. So go back out. Sorry, make sure you're in your project one. Get out of your geometry component. Go back over to where you got your banana over here. And actually, let's go ahead and create a null top, and pass the image from the banana to your null top. And it might be hard to see actually. Let me go ahead and turn off the viewing, the display of this to take it out of the background, because that'll let you see this a little bit better. But take a look at this wire right here. If I go, nothing, that this wire's, be quiet. This wire is solid right now. If I change parameters, go ahead and click on level 1 over here and bring it up its parameters in the parameter window, and go ahead and grab one of the sliders here from like black level and move it back and forth. Now look really closely at the wire and see how it kind of shimmers. That's showing data flowing through that wire. Okay? So you can tell that things are cooking when data flows through the wire. And if I go on this object and I click on the middle button, or those of you who don't have a mouse, I believe you would have to click on it and then click on the eye icon here to bring up info. It will tell you how many times this is cooked. And basically every time I dragged that slider, it would do like 60 cooks a second, right? So it's done 711 cooks, meaning it has rebuilt this image 711 times as I was dragging around that slider. As you know, because as soon as I'm trying to make it darker, it needs to rebuild the image darker. Go ahead and middle click or click on and activate the info for your movie file in. And you look at the cook on this, and it should say 1 or something really low. Mine says 6, probably because I've reloaded this banana more than once. But that has a lot fewer cooks because, and probably on yours it should only say 1. I don't know why it says 6 on mine. Maybe because I've had different versions of this file. I'm not sure. But basically, things only cook if they need to. And that's the way you want them. Because every cook of every object adds a certain amount of milliseconds to your total time it takes to build a frame. And the more things that are cooking, the more time it takes to build a frame. And then your frame rate will start dropping. Currently, we are at 60 frames a second. We are cooking with heat. We are taking less time than we need for every frame. So that's great. But if I start adding a whole bunch of 3D objects all over the place, or I start animating things with a bunch of random numbers that each one of those random numbers has to get generated, and then do a bunch of math, and then change the position of 700 or 900 different vertices, then your frame rate's going to start slowing down because it can't do all of that in one frame, right? So yeah, keeping track of things that are cooking. Oh, now go back to my notes. Somehow they got turned off. Here we go. Okay. Actually, I think it's about time to stop here for now. So go ahead and let's just name this save as and call it Touch Overview. And we'll continue on with this next week. For now, I just want to take the last 30 minutes and show you something cool to keep you excited about this class so that it's not just a bunch of numbers and me talking about things. We can actually do something cool. All right, so go ahead and close this patch. And oh, it closed. Okay, so if you only had one open, now I remember this, it'll close the whole program. But go ahead and you can, down here, if you had a specific file that you had opened before and you want to open it again, you can right-click on the icon and choose a particular file. But for now, let's just open it and make a new one. And it'll probably open that jelly bean file again.
So can you make a new file from the root, or do you have to do that in the file?
You generally want to do it inside your project 1 component. Is that what you're asking? Do you want, or you're asking, do you have to create a directory? What? I'm sorry. What were you asking?
Like if you're creating a new file, can you just go to your root file and create the file from there?
Are you talking about, is this what you mean as the root file?
No, so like one layer past that.
Oh, so up here?
Yeah.
You could add a component here with multiple projects windows, but generally you wouldn't. You usually you do all of your patching inside of the project 1 folder. You could rename that to something else, but you can also save files. You can create a project folder to put them in. If you're gonna have a bunch of files and a bunch of content or media files that go with that, then you might want to create a project folder and put all of those media files in there, because then you don't need to necessarily, like if you're calling those files up, you don't need to necessarily have an absolute path to that file because it's in the same project folder. You can just call it by banana.tiff. You don't have to say, this is in C:/documents/banana.tiff, right? Okay, great. So let's go ahead and delete all this. Command A, delete. And what are we going to do? We are going to create a 3D object. So let's go ahead and go into our comps and create, and this is a new thing. Before you start clicking on things, hold down the Shift key this time. Hold down the Shift key and click on, we want geometry and light and camera. And then let go. And now it's created all of those for me all at once. I can then put my render in there as well, which is a top. Okay. And there's my render. Let's go ahead and send that render to a null. Darn it, I have to click sometimes. I don't understand why sometimes I need to click and sometimes I don't.
It's got to load.
There. So go ahead and send that to a null just because we need to get used to doing that. Yeah.
If you right click the output.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can. So I didn't get a chance. I didn't get to that in our introduction. But you can also, without having to, you can also right click on the output of something and choose choose an object, and it will automatically connect that object to your things without you having to place an object like a null that's mad at me, and then connect it with a wire manually. You can have it automatically be connected by, instead of just clicking on a blank piece of network editor, you click on the output of the node that you want to add to, right? Okay, so we have this null. We're going to go ahead and turn on the display for the null so that we see our torus in the background. We're going to change the torus from a torus to a sphere. So go inside of the Geo1 container. And if I ever go inside something too fast and you don't know where I am, just look up here, because it tells you it says, oh, he's in project 1 Geo1, so I can go into my Geo1 and I'll be in the same place, right? So whoops, zoom out. There we go. There. So I'm inside Geo1. We have a torus. We're going to change that to a We're going to change that from a torus to a sphere. Let's go ahead and delete that and make a sphere. SOP. Sphere SOP. Okay, turn on the render flag for this sphere SOP. And if you go out, you should now see a sphere, right? We are actually, go back into the Geometry 1 container. And instead of rendering this, turn off the render flag. Let's go ahead and make a null object, and I didn't do what Shay just told me to do, which was click on the output. So I'm going to get better at that. Give me a minute. Okay, and I'm only doing this so that we can add operators in the input, and I can just leave this as rendered. So go ahead and turn on render flag for your null, and now we can add all kinds of operators in between this. And what we want to add first of all is some noise. Noise SOP, noise SOP, not noise chop. There's lots of different noises. We want the noise surface operator. And go ahead and actually, let's do this right. I can right click on the input and choose noise, and it will automatically create it as insert it in between. I can also click on the right click on the wire and say insert operator, and I'm choosing noise. And now I have this blobby sphere, as you can see, right? And you know, this warped, deformed sphere. Just this, two pieces of code, and it kicks the crap out of Max. Max can't do this. At least you might be able to do it if you built it from scratch in like Gen or some things, but like with your standard objects in Max, you just can't do this, which is why I love this program. So that's a little more noise than we want, I think. Let's change the type from sparse to alligator, because I kind of like it. Alligator kind of makes a wave that moves from one vertex to nearby vertex and kind of moves around as a wave. And go ahead and change the period to something a little bit bigger. And you can change the exponent to something maybe a little smaller. And the amplitude, whoa, that's crazy. Get it to so that you like the way that the thing is warping around. So that's pretty nice. Let's add a material to this. So right now it's just a standard gray, and it has a default Phong shininess shader to it. But let's go ahead and create a SOP, a material SOP. And oh, that's supposed to be inline too, isn't it? Okay, I forgot. So go ahead, actually, let's do a box select of these two objects and move them over to give yourself some room. And I'm going to insert an operator here called, what was it called? What? Material, thank you. A material. And we'll need an actual material mat to do this. So go over to your mats. You can double click on the network to bring it up, or hit the tab button, and then hit tab till you get to mat, or click on the mat tab. And we're going to go ahead and just use a Phong material. And we can change the color of this by going over to like diffuse, and I can change the diffuse color to something else like blue. And then down here under material, I can do this a couple ways. I could type in the name of this material, which is, the name is Phong1 down here. I could actually change this to something else. I could call this blue if I wanted to. And now down here, material, all I'd have to do is type blue, and that would work. Another thing you could do is drag the material onto the material SOP, and you see that plus icon underneath the arrow. That means it's going to add a reference to that object, and it makes it blue. And so now we have like a blue blobby sphere, and that's cool. What I want to do actually is I'm going to make like a Pac-Man ghost, and we're going to shortcut it and just use a model that I made in Blender earlier, and bring it in here. So let's go ahead and download that model. So if you go back to the website and you go into week 1, so over here on the schedule, all of these different weeks opens up a subpage. And in this subpage is where I'm going to post the screen recording video of what I did in class. And it's also, I'll also post files that we might need for the class. Go ahead and download ghost2.obj and this material.001 diffuse color PNG. So download both of those. Okay. When you get that, go ahead, find them in your Finder or your Windows Explorer, if you're so inclined, and just drag them onto the desktop. So where did I put mine? Downloads. Ghost 2. So go ahead and just drag it onto the desktop, and it will create a file in SOP with that ghost. Right? This is actually from, I stole this from Thingiverse. It's a 3D print file for a ghost. And I created a UV map for it. And so this is the UV map. So grab the material.001 diffuse color and drag that up there, and that creates this blue UV map for this object. And let's see. Go ahead. Let's create another material, Fong material. And let's change this one's name from Fong1 to Ghost. Right? You can do it in your parameters. You can also click down here at the bottom and change its name. Okay? And now go ahead and drag the material 001 diffuse color movie file in operator on top of the ghost, and you see it does that same sort of plus, and then it brings up a context menu and says, how do you want to try to apply this? We want to use this as a color map, I believe. So then it creates a color map and puts some random white spots on this. These white areas don't make any sense for a torus, but when they line up with the UV map built into the ghost, it'll make the eyes white and the rest of the ghost blue. So go ahead under ghost. Actually, let's see. So this, actually, let's do it this way. Delete the sphere, put the ghost down here, patch in the ghost, and by default we get the blue material that we created. We're going to redo this with the ghost material, so just drag that over and add, and now we get a ghost with white eyes the way we want. And now go back to your noise and adjust it so that it looks like an ethereal ghost and not some kind of thing that's getting really fat. So I like the alligator. I like to put my period up kind of high, put my exponent kind of high as well, I believe. Yeah. And the amplitude, just kind of drag these around until you find something that you like. And you get this kind of, you can get the ghost to kind of wobble around and his eyes. But you notice that we are animating these parameters, right? And we're animating it per frame with a bunch of different noise numbers. And look at our FPS. It's gone from 60 down to 40. So I just want you to be aware. You can do some really cool stuff animating and deforming geometry, but it's one of the most expensive procedures you can do as far as frame rate in Max. So I'm sorry, in TouchDesigner.
What does it go to if you jump to performance mode?
So let's take a look. So are we rendering? We have the render flag on. Let's go ahead and zoom out. Okay, we see a ghost still, and he's still blobbing around. So let's go ahead and put into perform mode, and I get nothing. Why? Why? I just solved this a minute ago. It was because, what? Does somebody have a reason? Do I need a window?
I mean, in perform, you can just, like up on the top in perform, you can change the operator to null 1. So
oh, right. So it's in the. Okay, hold on. Escape to get out.
Send this guy out.
Oh, I just need an out.
Yeah.
Okay, so after the null 1, I need an out. What kind of a top? Okay, so I need an out top. There was another way to make it work too that I did earlier. All right, let's try that. Now go into perform mode. Hey, there we go. So I got my little blobby ghost. And now let's look at how we can maybe do something else that's cool. We haven't touched our lights or our cameras yet. For now, I'm going to leave the light alone. I'm not going to touch the light. But let's do something with the camera. So our camera, we can change its position over here by default. The translation is its like position in the world. So if you had it at 0, 0, 0, it would be like in the middle of the ghost, and it probably wouldn't see much. It might see the back half of the ghost or something. But by default, they push that back 5 units in the Z scale. So that means it's 5 units away from the ghost. We could make that 10 units away, and the ghost would be smaller in the view, as you can see. Or I could make this 100, and he would be tiny. Right? So there's a tiny ghost. You can, let me show you this. There's a thing called value ladder. If I click on this value and hold, it brings up this value ladder. I can then select kind of what range I want numbers to jump by, either that being 0.1, 1, or 10. And then you continue to hold, slide your mouse sideways one way or the other way, and you can see I can make that value increment by the range that I chose. So I probably want to put it on 10 and then slide back. This is one thing that's really annoying if you don't have a mouse that you can't really do very easily. Yeah, there, that's a little better. All right, so translate, I'm around -3. I'm probably wanting to move him down a little bit, so I'm going to grab the Y. Whoops, that's too much. 1, there we go. And bring that down until he's kind of in the center. And actually, let's bring him, let's see. We can, all right, there we go. We can scale this object a little bit because he's a little bit small. So let's just scale him. Make this like a 2. 2, does that work? Oh no, that didn't do it. Oh well. I can also go inside and I can add a scale SOP to this, and that will definitely make it bigger. That's what I did before. So coming in between the file and the material 1, I'm going to add a scale SOP. Or what is it? Transform, rather. Transform. Scaling is a part of transforming. As transform includes both scaling and moving the object one way or the other, right? So here I can scale it at 2 by 2 by 2, and now he should be twice as big, right? And that scale actually affects how that random noise gets applied to it as well. Okay, so we were going to animate the camera. Oh, we are out of time, aren't we? All right, so all I was going to do is this camera, I can, let's see. First thing, I wanted to show you the camera. We don't have time for that. All right, let me just show you the one thing. I'm going to, instead of animating the camera, let's just animate like a rotation. So rotate, because I haven't shown you any properties yet. So I can, here on this rotation, say I want it to spin around like this. That's a rotation around the y-axis. So here on this rotate, I could make this a 45, and it should, wait, why? Sorry, that's not the geometry. Pre-transform? Is that what I have to do? Nope. Don't know why that's not working. Okay, was I on camera? Okay. I guess I have to do it inside. So going inside here, so let's do, this is a good opportunity actually to use our split window. pane so that we can still see this on the outside. So let's go ahead and make a split window pane, either vertical or horizontal, whichever one you like, and go back inside your geometry. And now I can still see the ghost, and I can change things in here. And all I want to do with we're 2 minutes over already, but all I want to do is here on our transform, yeah, might as well do it there. I can change this rotate to, we're going to have it rotate around the Y. I can do something like I can put a specific value in, and now he's rotated at 45 degrees. But I wanted to animate this, so what I was going to do is me.time.frame, I believe. And now he automatically, as time progresses, he's rotating around. But the problem is we have this set up for 600 frames, so he doesn't rotate around all the way when it loops. You can see that hop, right? So what I can do is, this is actually a Python code. Me.time.frame refers to the timer, the internal timer of this transform, and its frames, its current frame that it's on. So this is a value that we can do math to, just like anything else. And we'll talk more about this probably, maybe not next week, maybe the week after that. We'll go into really intensive about how to use Python code. It's actually pretty simple. It's a lot easier than C# in my opinion. So I can take this value and divide it by 600, and now he should rotate. But now he's rotating between 0 and 1 degree. So that's no good. And now we can take that and multiply it by 360 degrees. And now, as this playhead goes from 0 to 600, he will do 1 full rotation. And it won't have that hiccup. Okay? So I wanted to show you that. Your homework for next week is to create a touch network that deforms or moves 3D objects or primitives. You don't have to use the ghost. You don't have to use a 3D model. It can be a sphere or a cube or a triangle or something. And use some noise or just play around with the different operators to make it do something interesting. Use some like noise like we did here in this example. You can also, I would like you to use some code in there like me.time.frame. You feel free to go on to any of those early tutorials and pull out something else if you want. But if you give me next week, if you give me 2 different objects where one of them is moving or deforming, I'll be happy. The other thing that I was going to do today that we didn't get a chance to do was map the outputs from chops to parameters. So right now you can see that there's these 3 boxes here. One of those is constant, so I can put in a specific value and it doesn't change. One uses Python code, the blue one, and then the green one we didn't get to, and that's exporting from a chop. So if you want to try to figure out how to do that, that would be bonus for next week. If not, we'll just talk about that next week. You can also, I was going to use an LFO chop to make the camera move up and down. But you don't have to move the camera in your homework for next week because we didn't get to that. So let me see if I need to change. So create a touch network that deforms or moves 3D objects or primitives. That's still on there, yes. Use at least 2 3D elements in your network. Yes, I'd like you to do that. And animate at least one of the objects with chops. Don't have to do that. So let me take that off. Just animate one of the objects somehow. It's up to you how do you do it. Use a Python script. I'll put a star on that. If you don't use a Python script, I won't count it against you, but I would love it if you did. Okay? And then if you just do something cool that I haven't thought of, that would be awesome too. So just play around. Get something cool. Get something rendered. Try to make sure. This week I won't count it against you if you hit the perform window and it doesn't work. That's fine. As long as I can see something in your patch, I can see that you've played around with it and tried to get these different things to work. That's all you need to do for your homework next time. Please do set up a blog, make a screen recording of what you got, and put that screen recording on your blog. And then also email me the file. So I want both the blog post and the file, right? Everybody else won't necessarily have access to the file, but they should have access to your blog post if they want to see what you were doing. I'd love everybody to be able to see and know what everybody else is doing in the class. Okay? Any questions? Cool. Well, thank you for a good first class, and we'll see you next week. Yeah.
It won't let me scroll down to hit join for your class group. Yeah, like
I need to invite you to that.
Should I just email you that?
I will. So yeah. So when you have your, I'll email you an invitation to all you guys today. When you have your blogs post done, I'd like you to on the website, and you only need to do it this one time. Post that to the little bulletin board that I put on the website, just so that we have an easy place that everybody can go and find those links. But you won't be able to post anything on this forum until I invite you. But I'll invite you this afternoon. So make sure those of you who aren't registered for the classes that I get your info today, so that I can add you to my list. All right, great. And actually, can I get, give me your email address real quick. Let me just put it in a text file for now. Go ahead and just type it in your email address. Who else do I need to sign things for? If you're not registered for the class, please come and put your email address on this little text file.
So I'm registered to this class, but I'm thinking about just audit the class.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of thing I said with Cami, that if you get too far behind where you haven't been doing the projects, then you need to be actively in the class. If you're not actively participating with the class, I don't have room for you, because as you can see, it's pretty crowded in here, right? So yeah, as long as you stay in sync with the class, that's cool. If you fall way behind, I'm just going to ask you to leave, because I don't have enough chairs. Does that make sense?
Then do we have to also do the blog thing?
No. You don't necessarily have to turn in your homework, but you have to have
files,
whatever, you have to have the homework assignment done, because 90% of the time we'll be using that homework assignment and continuing on with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to take a class, but I'm registered as a part-time student because, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Just like financial problems in the admin. But I'll do all the assignments.
Yeah.
And I'll show up to class. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so do I have email addresses for everybody who's not registered yet?
I also have
Yeah.
I had to drop a class because I don't have enough credits for elementary school, so I have to take more requirements right now. But I think I will audit the class.
Okay.
And do the projects.
That's fine, as long as you keep up on the projects. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Great.
And I got a technical question.
1 second. Touch, add students. Okay.
I still can't open TouchDesigner in Windows. I don't know why. It just doesn't show up anything.
Well,
yeah, I downloaded.
And you're trying to get it to work because of well, you're using Touch. Have you tried 99?
Yeah, 99, 88. I don't.
Doesn't work. And then, did you try any of the earlier builds of that? So
yeah,
like.
I think so. Like 2017 version.
Yeah, that's weird. It works on mine. What?
I don't know why. I think.
So I would say, does it? But it does work on your Mac side, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so send an email or do some research why it's not working on your PC side. So if you send them an email to their tech support, they'll probably help you out because that's pretty.
Okay.
You know, that's a tech support type issue as opposed to a problem with your program, right?
Okay.
Programming. So yeah, in the meantime, I understand you probably want it to work in Windows because you want to use Connect and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in the meantime, you just use it in Mac, and we'll try to figure it out going forward.
Yeah, I think I can.
She can't get it to work on Windows. It works fine on Mac.
Oh, we're on boot camp.
Yeah, she's on boot camp.
It's just
Probably the issue.
I know it can work. Mine works on Windows in boot camp. What is different? I'll have to look at what's different. It's probably also, it might be the, no, because you're in boot camp. Like your Windows is the same as my Windows.
Is that because graphic card?
Oh,
maybe?
Yeah. So,
maybe,
couple different ways
but
to do
you
it.
can change. You can change the settings in
one
TouchDesigner
is,
to not even use your graphic card to do everything as software.
So the way the
it will make your
performance
frame
mode
rate
works
terrible.
way up here.
But
like,
the problem right now is that I
is
can't
the
open.
you can't even open
performance
it.
mode.
Yeah, so I don't
right?
know. It's a tech support issue.
Right now, this guy is looking for a Windows
but
operator
have you tried doing a
project
Google
one,
search
which is
about that?
this
Yeah,
guy.
there's
Right?
one.
So it's going to look for whatever's coming out of
post about
here.
it.
Okay.
So what you
I
need
don't
to
think
do.
they have the same problem.
Yeah.
Similar,
Mac,
they
yeah,
can open
Windows, Boot
It should be.
Camp,
Why is it?
TouchDesigner won't open. Cannot open TouchDesigner on
Yeah.
Windows 10. I'm running Windows 10.
I'm sorry.
Have you tried to run it from
No.
the exe in
You
your
added
programs
out.
folder?
So it's a
Make
set
sure all your
of
Windows drivers are
top
up to
folder.
date, and then if you run a computer with a graphics switching, make sure 99 is using the correct GPU. Also worth uninstalling and try
This
reinstalling.
guy.
But use the installer package to
Then,
uninstall not Windows
look
add
up
remove
above,
programs.
Now he's got a thing.
Did you try any of that?
Go into
I tried
performance
all of
mode.
Okay.
And you should
Oh,
have
yeah.
Maybe I'll
Flag
just
Ghost.
email
There
them
he is.
to see
Yep.
if they have
It's
the same.
saying, did you try this version?
Yeah, I followed this post.
Okay, so yeah, in your email to tech support, say, I looked at this, copy this address and say, I followed the suggestions on this post. I seem to be having the same problem, but I can't make it work.
Okay, yeah, I will
And,
do that.
okay? Great. I'll see you later, Wailu. Yeah. Never get as far as you think, do you? Yeah. All right, I gotta run away to a meeting.
Okay.